July 9th, 1940, Kent, England. The sun rose over the Kent coast in the early morning, turning the fields golden, as if trying to hide what was already written in the sky: war. The country was in a state of sleepless anxiety. It was the second month of the Battle of Britain, and every day brought new losses. Over the past 3 weeks, the German Luftwaffe has carried out more than 3,500 raids on British airfields, ports, and industrial centers. In June 1940 alone, the RAF lost 287 aircraft, 169 of them in aerial combat. The Germans have 500 fighters and bombers. More than 1,200 pilots and technicians from both sides were killed. There was more than just fighting in the air, there was fear. At the White Grove farm in the village of Harrow West, 15 miles from Dover, Edgar Hargreaves was watering cabbages. He hadn't seen the numbers. He hasn't heard about any losses. He just knew that the wind was louder than usual today, like someone shouting in the distance, and that his oats, grown in conditions of drought for the second year in a row, are growing worse than last year. And the rooster, which crowed every morning as if announcing the beginning of a new day, has now become too noisy, and it may have to be killed. Edgar Hargreaves, 42, a former Royal Air Force RAF volunteer pilot who was discharged in 1929 for social reasons, lives here alone. His wife Mary left for London in 1937, never returning. Son Thomas, 7 years old, died of diphtheria in 1938, the very night when Edgar started the engine of his DH for the last time. 60 Moth. The plane, bought with his last savings in 1927, stands in a distant barn, under a tarp, like a sleeping dragon in a cave. He hasn't flown since. But on July 9th, 1940, everything changed. On this day, German Ju-88 and He-1111 bombers attacked the airfield in Dover. Losses: 12 planes shot down, 3 damaged, 15 people killed, 27 wounded. More than 300 tons of aerial bombs were used. On the same day, the RAF fought off 18 raids, losing 7 fighters. It was one of the most brutal nights in the history of the Battle of Britain. A man in a gray suit appeared at the gate, with a tie tied so tightly that it looked like he was breathing only through his nose. His eyes are like those of a fox that has just dug a rabbit hole. "I'm Colonel Algernon Smith, Ministry of Information," he said, without offering his hand. "I have no business with the government," he muttered, without turning around.
"It's about your plane, Mr. Hargreaves." The words hung in the air like smoke over a burnt barn. Edgar froze. No one knew about the plane. No one except himself and maybe old Billy from the neighboring farm, who saw him one day when he was rolling the moth out to dry after the rain. "It's a civilian machine," he said, without turning around. "No guns, no radio, not even a helmet." "We don't need guns," Smith said, coming closer. "We need eyes." He took a roll of paper out of his jacket pocket and unfolded the map. It marked a piece of land 15 miles north of Dover, Ashford Farm. Nothing remarkable. Arable land, a grove, a pond. But something about this place wasn't right. Edgar couldn't explain it. He just felt the skin on his neck tighten. "We're asking you to take an aerial photo of this area," Smith continued, "from 500 feet up. It's safer in the clouds. No one will notice." "Why not the RAF?" "Because the RAF can't fly there, but you can. No one is waiting for you, and no one will suspect." Edgar looked at the map, then at the sky. The clouds stretched like torn sheets. Somewhere up there, Britain's fate was being decided, and he was still watering the cabbage. "How much will you pay?" £200 and a ton of coal for the winter." Edgar nodded. "Tomorrow at dawn." He didn't sleep last night. He sat by the fireplace, staring into the coals, and thought about how in 1928 he and Thomas first took to the air. His son sat on his lap, laughing as the wind ruffled his hair, and shouted, "Father! Father!" Edgar promised then that he would teach him how to fly, but he didn't have time. Now he was walking towards the barn. The moon was full, as bright as a frosty plate. He took the tarp off the moth. The plane looked pathetic. The paint was peeling, the leather straps were cracked, but the fuselage was as straight as a grenadier's back. He ran his hand over the wing as if stroking a sleeping dog. Inside the shed was his old camera, a Zeiss Icon with a leather case and a manual shutter. A gift from my father on the day I got my flight license. He mounted it on a wooden tripod and bolted it to the floor of the cabin. He checked the fuel tanks. They were full. Spare gasoline in cans is in place. The oil is fresh. He changed it every Sunday just to keep his hands from shaking from idleness. Dawn came dimly, in a gray haze. Edgar put on his old leather jacket, a helmet with headphones without wires, just for show, and got into the cabin. The engine started on the third attempt, coughing up blue smoke. He taxied onto the field, accelerated, and the wheels lifted off the ground. The air was cold and thick, like jelly. The wind hit my face, making my eyes water. But Edgar was smiling. For the first time in 11 years, he felt alive. He flew north, keeping low over the hills. Kent stretched beneath him like a green carpet, crisscrossed with hedges and winding roads. Smoke from London could be seen in the distance, either factories or fires. No one knew anymore. An hour later, he saw the target. At first, nothing unusual. The same hills, the same fields. But the closer he got to Ashford Farm, the more anxious he became. Not a single bird, not a single trace of animals. Crows were everywhere in Kent. They circled over the fields, cawed on branches, tore up the corpses of fallen sheep. But here is silence. The coffin room. He dropped to 500 feet, as requested. He aimed the camera. He pulled the trigger. Click, click, click. And then I noticed the trees in the grove were not moving. Generally, not a single sheet. There was wind, he could feel it in the cabin, but the false crowns stood motionless, like theatrical decorations. He dropped down to 300 feet. Now I saw clearly. There were camouflaged nets under the arable land. No straw or earth under them. Metal. The shape of a hangar. And in the corner of the plot, not a well, but a ventilation shaft disguised as a barn. He took a few more pictures and shot up sharply. My heart was pounding as if it was trying to escape from my chest. He was used. Not the RAF. Not British. He was hired by someone else. Or Smith knew. He knew it was a German base. But then why send a farmer with a civilian plane? He returned to the White Grove near noon. Smith was waiting at the gate, still in the same gray suit. "Well, what is it?" he asked, holding out his hand. Edgar silently handed over the reel of film. "Nice work, Mr. Hargreaves." Smith smiled. "You have helped us a lot." "What is this place?" "It's just a farm. We needed an assessment of the harvest." "There are no birds there." Smith froze for a moment. Then he shrugged his shoulders. "Apparently, the cats ate them all." He left without looking back. Discovering the truth.
Edgar spent the whole evening in the barn, unwinding negatives. I developed them in the bathroom, in the red light of a lantern, and I saw something I hadn't noticed from the air. Tire tracks, perfectly parallel, not from the tractor, from something heavy, from the plane. He knew these footprints. I saw them in the RAF when I came on business in 1938. These were the tracks from the Messerschmitt Bf 109 chassis. The Germans, right in England. He couldn't sleep. I went to bed but jumped up an hour later. RAF plans, radio intercepts, disinformation. Everything was mixed up in my head, but he knew one thing for sure. He would be arrested tomorrow. Or they'll kill you. He had seen too much. It was necessary to act. He went back to the barn. There were bags of ammonium nitrate in the corner, a fertilizer he had ordered back in the spring. There are cans of gasoline nearby, and on the shelf is my wife's old pocket watch. The mechanism was still working. Edgar sat down on a stool and began to think, preparing for the impact. At night, he assembled an improvised device, a wooden box, a bag of nitrate, gasoline, a detonator from a hunting cartridge capsule, and a clock mechanism set to fire 2 hours after launch. Not a bomb, but rather a huge homemade firecracker. But if you drop it next to the fuel plant. He was going to leave again in the morning, but 2 black cars were already parked at the farm gate. 3 men in civilian clothes got out of them. One of them was holding a revolver. "Edgar Hargreaves," the taller one asked, "you are under arrest on suspicion of collaborating with the enemy." "I worked for you." "At us?" the other chuckled. "Colonel Smith is an Obware agent. You helped the Germans to clarify the coordinates of their own false base." Edgar didn't argue. He took off abruptly in the direction of the barn. Shot. The bullet whizzed past his ear. He stormed inside, bolted the door, jumped into the Moth's cabin, and started the engine. "He's flying away!" they shouted outside. He tore down the barn doors on takeoff. The wheels barely touched the ground as the plane took off. Bullets were pounding on the fuselage, but it was already gaining altitude. Now, he had no home. There was no future. There was only a goal. He directed the Moth to the north. Flight of death. The dawn of the second day found him over the English Channel. He hadn't slept in 2 days. My eyes burned and my hands were shaking, but he knew that if he didn't destroy that base, the Germans would take dozens of fighter jets into the air tomorrow, and the battle for Britain would be over before August. He landed in a field, 20 miles from the target, hid the plane under the trees, and walked to the hill where he could see the airfield. The Germans didn't even disguise themselves at night. Lights, trucks, people in uniform. Yes, it was a real base, and it looks like it's prepared for an amphibious assault. He returned to the Moth, loaded the box with the bomb into the cabin, secured it with ropes. It took off without lights. As he flew up, he saw a Bf 109 patrol fighter circling the airfield. Edgar hid in the clouds. Waited. As the Messer flew past, he abruptly surfaced and began to descend. The anti-aircraft guns opened fire too late.
He dropped the box from a height of 100 feet. I saw him falling between 2 gas stations. I didn't look at the explosion. He pulled the steering wheel towards himself. The blast wave caught up with him at an altitude of 500 feet. The plane spun. The glass burst. There's a ringing in my ears. The smell of burnt metal and fertilizers is in my nose. He was heading south, and he knew he wouldn't be coming home. but maybe his sacrifice will stop the war for at least a day. And below, on the destroyed base, the German officers looked at the burning wreckage and could not understand. Who did this? Where did this plane come from? And why didn't he shoot, but just fell from the sky like thunder? After the explosion, Edgar did not fall. He kept the plane on the wing, even though the right wing was punctured and the engine was on fire. He was flying on autopilot, in fact, on intuition and fear. The wind tore at the cabin as if it wanted to rip him out of the sky. He could see the sea below, gray and stormy. Storm. If he falls, he will float among the debris until he suffocates. But he held on, controlled it, just like the first day I learned to fly in 1925. Then he almost fell too, and he survived. He chose a field off the coast, not too far from Dover, but out of control. Landed with a roll, the wheels hit the ground, and the moth slid, catching fire. Edgar jumped out of the cockpit, fell on the grass, and immediately got up, and saw that the plane was on fire, but not exploding, just smoke. Heavy, black. He ran without looking back. No chasing after him. The Germans didn't seem to notice him, or they thought it was just the wreckage of a downed hurricane. He sat down on a rock at the edge of the forest and took out a photograph of Thomas in a white shirt with a balloon. My hands were shaking. He squeezed the photo as if it were the only thing left of his life. The car arrived an hour later, not the police, a man in a military uniform with the RAF emblem. He approached without removing his helmet. "Mr. Hargreaves?" he asked. You were at the airfield?" "I destroyed it," Edgar said, "by myself." The officer didn't believe me. Then he saw the wreckage, the burnt-out parts of the moth, and realized, this is not a British plane. It was a civilian, and he had no right to fly. "You broke the rules," the officer said. "But you saved the lives of hundreds of people." "I didn't save you. I killed him." "You destroyed the base. It is important." "For whom?" The officer was silent. Then he held out his hand. "You will be rewarded, and rank, and maybe a place in the RAF." "Edgar, I'm a farmer. I want to be a farmer." He's gone. A week later, the local newspaper wrote, "An unknown pilot destroyed a German false base in Kent. The search continues." No one recognized his name. No one knew that it was a farmer from the White Grove. And Edgar planted the oats again. In the field where there used to be a rooster, there is now a young hen. She was quacking, as if she were saying, "Now the silence is ours." And every night before going to sleep, he looked up at the sky and thought, if Thomas were alive, he would fly too. Maybe he's flying now, somewhere out there in the clouds. Meeting with my daughter. 3 months have passed. The war was on. The Battle of Britain had reached its peak. The Germans were losing planes, RAF pilots, but Edgar wasn't flying anymore. He was sitting in his shed, reading books on aviation that he hadn't read before. He knew his name was on the list somewhere, probably in the classified files, but he didn't want to be heroes. He wanted to be just a human being. One evening in October, a woman came to him, in a long coat with a handbag. She said, "I'm Thomas's daughter. I came from London." Edgar didn't believe it, but she showed me a picture of Thomas, a little girl with pigtails. He found out. I grew up in an orphanage, she said, but Mom always said, your father is a hero. I wanted to find him. I found. Edgar didn't say anything. He just took her by the hand and led her to the fire in the barn. Do you know what I did? He asked. I know, she said. I read it in the papers. There was no name, but I felt it. It's you. They stayed up until morning. We talked about each other's lives. She said that she works in the hospital, helping the wounded. He told how he destroyed the base, how he fled, how he lived in fear. You're not a hero, she said. You're just a man who did what he had to do. No, he said. I'm a hero. I killed the children. I destroyed my family. You saved the other kids, she interrupted. You gave them a chance to live. He didn't answer. She left the next day, but I left him a letter. I'll be back. When the war is over. I'll be waiting for you. Edgar put the letter in the trunk, under the old photographs. Edgar got back into the DH-60 Moth cab, but didn't start the engine. He just sat there, holding the steering wheel, and looked out the window. There are clouds in the sky. It's like he's flying again. No noise. Without fear. The final. In December 1940, Britain announced that the Germans had lost control of the English Channel. The base in Kent was destroyed. No one knew who did it. But a strange note appeared in the RAF reports. The participation of a civilian pilot is possible. The car is a DH-60 Moth. Description: old, manually operated. The pilot has not been identified. In 1942, Edgar received a letter from the ministry. It read, "In recognition of your services, you are awarded the honorary title of Hero of Great Britain. The reward is £500. Please confirm receipt." He didn't answer. He didn't want any awards. He wanted to be forgotten. But in 1945, when the war ended, a girl came to him. The same one, Thomas's daughter. She was already an adult, beautiful, in a military uniform. She said, "I served in the RAF. I've been flying. I did what you would like me to do." They went to London. We visited the Aviation Museum. There's a list of heroes on the wall. And there, at the very end, was a name. Edgar Hargreaves, farmer, 1940. "They remember," she said. "No," he replied. "They only remember the result, not a human being." But he smiled, for the first time in 20 years. In 1950, Edgar Hargreaves died, at the age of 60, from heart disease. There is a simple stone on his grave. On him, Edgar Hargreaves, farmer, pilot, father, the hero that no one knew. His moth burned down, but there was only one item left in the shed, an old Zeiss Icon camera. And next to it was a picture of him, Thomas, and a girl laughing against the blue sky. And in the sky, somewhere high above Kent, the wind is still circling, as if trying to find the one who once destroyed the airfield to save the world.